Okay, so the charge of the Light Brigade. First things first, the poem is called The Charge of the Light Brigade. It is a poem about conflict. It's set in the war. It's about conflict, and the charge of the Light Brigade is literally a charge forward. It is charging into battle. And all you need to know about a Light Brigade is that a brigade is a kind of collection of soldiers, and there will be two types of brigades. There would be a Light Brigade and a Heavy Brigade. Now, the Heavy Brigade would have guns, okay, would maybe have cannons. The Light Brigade is, oh, by the way, all these people on horses. The Light Brigade have horses, but they have swords. Okay, so we need to remember about a Light Brigade is that they have swords. In this poem, they're called sabres. Okay? And the charge of the Light Brigade is written by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And Alfred Lord Tennyson is... I've just realised that I want to check that spelling. I want you all to check that spelling. And I'm not going to pause my video and redo it because it's important that we all can spell this word. That is where I go wrong. Poet Law E8. Okay? Laureate. Now, the job of a poet laureate is to be the nation's poet. If you are named poet laureate, if you are the nation's poet, it is your job to write poetry about national events or things that are nationally important. So things that are important to England, things that are important to Britain. Okay? Now, the charge of the Light Brigade, this kind of conflict, was the conflict of the Crimean War. Now, the Crimea was within the kind of Ottoman Empire, which is an empire at the time, which is mainly focused on trade and money. It was like getting the routes between countries. It was occupation of routes so that you would have the best trade, therefore make more profit. And Crimea was kind of a place where lots of powers fought for. This war, mainly between England and Britain and Russia, but with some allies, was over Crimea. Now, the British did win the Crimean War, however you feel about that. However, this specific battle by the charge of the Light Brigade, is the Battle of Balaclava, and the British did not win this battle. Okay? Now, what you need to know about the Crimean War is this. It is the first ever in Britain live reported war. Now, they did not have television and they did not have radio, but they did have the newspaper. And this was the first war to be reported regularly via newspaper. So it wasn't obviously live updates like we get now. Now when something huge happens, you see it all over social media, but it was being reported back home regularly. So this was not only a war, but a war that the people of the nation were very kind of interested in being updated upon. And therefore the loss of the Battle of Balaclava was a really big national event. Now, the Battle of Balaclava was lost because this context is important. The place where this battle took place was a valley. A valley is a V shape in land formation, usually near mountains and hills. And the British are on one side and Russia on the other side. Now, the British Army got some bad advice, some bad intel, and the captain or one of the big officers, like a general, ordered the Light Brigade into the valley. That was the mistake, really. That was what should never have happened. And the soldiers, being soldiers, followed orders and they went into the valley. Now, the problem with being in a valley is that you have to go down and stay down in order to get back up. And the Russians, therefore, had the advantage of the high ground. The high ground is one of the most important in battle strategy because you can see the most of what's going on and you can therefore strategize good plans for how to attack the soldiers that are coming to you. But these soldiers down here can't see everything, and therefore they're at a lesser advantage. And this mistake cost many lives. And at the point of this mistake, people worried that they would lose the Crimean War. Now, Alfred Lord Tennyson could have written about the mistake. He could have written about how a mistake at a high level caused lots of people to lose their lives. He could have written about thoughts on war and how senseless death is, and it could have been a poem about that. But he is the nation's poet, and this poem is one of the only poems in the anthology that is about glory. If we glorify something, we say that it is good, or that it is right, or that it should happen. Okay? And this poem is not really about the negatives of war, or death, or the political challenges to how people see war and how sacrifices are made in war, how powerful institutions create war but people suffer it. It's not about that. This poem is about the bravery and the resilience of the men who fought in the war. So Alfred Lord Tennyson writes about the people and the men in the war and glorifies them and makes their sacrifice something that should be remembered and turns it into really an event. The Charge of the Light Brigade is a poem that was forced to be learned off by heart in many primary schools. Afterwards, it became very, very, very famous. And that is because it presents that very national and patriotic message that to die for your country is an honour and a glory. To die for your country is to die for your king. To die for your king is to die for God. It is all tied up in this patriotic and endless glory. You will often hear the phrase God's glory. Yeah, so glory is also linked to this idea of heaven and the afterlife and receiving glory. So these soldiers, because of their commitment, because of their sacrifice, are honoured. This is a poem of honour, of respect, of admiration, and it feeds into this patriotic reflection of war. The Charge of the Light Brigade is therefore a very important poem to know, because it will compare beautifully to all of the other war poems, because this poem glorifies war.